Hello friends, welcome to this module on MVC Architecture for web application. In this module, we will be trying to understand how to design and develop a web app which is going to be more maintainable, fine, which is more understandable, it is easier to create and maintain. Okay, fine. So, let us see what is this MVC. MVC stands for Model View Controller. This is a design pattern which was first used for GUI components. GUI component, as far as Java is concerned, in Java we have seen swing components. Swing components are also based on this MVC design pattern. So, what do we mean by MVC? Fine. Let us try to see this even in a simple component like swing components. What is meant by MVC here? MVC, it says okay, model, view and controller. So, what is model, what is view and what is controller? It simply specifies that we should have these three things are always there in any kind of a component. Anything you develop has all these three parts. So, the idea here is to have them in separate parts rather than have separate components, have them in separate parts, each component, each responsibility. The model part being handled by one kind of component, we have another kind of component to handle the view part, another kind of component to handle the controller aspect. So, anything is having to have all three aspects. If we consider a swing component, fine, maybe if you are considering simple swing component like JText field or something, yes, in a JText field, fine, UI component which has a text field maybe. So, in text field, what do we have? Oh, there is some text. That is a data, fine, which is associated with it, fine. Model is nothing but this data aspect, the data which is to be rendered, data which is to be displayed. It is a string basically, yes, string value which is for my particular component. My GUI component is displaying a string, but this GUI component is setting up the pixels of my screen. It is using a particular amount of rectangular area. Fine. It is showing my string in a particular way. This is what is the responsibility of a view. The view uses the model. The view knows what is the string which is to be rendered. What is the font which is to be used? Font is part of the model, name of the font. But how it is to be rendered? The how to do the rendering, that is the responsibility of the view. Model is the data. View, how to render, how to display it, how to presentation part, and controller, oh, for this particular GUI component for my text field, there is an interaction aspect. Oh, someone presses a key. Oh, when someone presses a key, what should be done? Oh, if he is pressing a key at the right place, right kind of keys, I have to update my string. There has to be someone who, oh, what is it that he is pressing? What are the keys he is pressing? Oh, if he is pressed this key, fine, where is the current caret position, what should I do, fine. So, this is what is the controller. Controller handles the interaction from the outside world, fine. Any interaction to this component from outside is handled by the controller. So, that way you develop a system, every system, any kind of thing, they would have a data associated, fine. There is some associated data which we call as the model part. There is an aspect of viewing, fine, someone who is responsible for rendering it, showing it, fine. So, there has to be separate kind of components who are responsible for how to show it, who do not know technology about how to render it, and there has to be another kind of a set of components who know how to handle the interaction. If there is an interaction, how will it be handled, fine. So, fine, if we have seen this being done in swing components have been following the MVC design pattern. This kind of design pattern is used very commonly in, yes, in case of web application, for my application. Oh, we have some, for any web application which you develop, we are dealing with some data. There has to be some data which has to be displayed. Who will display it? What is the technology used for displaying? Or normally, what is being used for display? In case of web applications, the client is a browser, and most common thing for browsers is the HTML. So, output is going to be HTML. If you have to give HTML output, what would be the component used from your web application, whatever we have seen so far? Oh, in that it is going to be a JSP. JSP will be used as a view aspect. So, view is handled by JSP. Fine. When we follow MVC for web applications, view would be handled by JSP. Model, as far as model is concerned, it depends totally on your applications. Whatever applications we are developing, they have their own requirements, they have their own kinds of components. What we normally have is, yes, we have various options, in our applications. Someone clicks something, when someone clicks, it has some kind of an interaction with the application. Fine. So, we render some JSP. On the JSP, there might be some buttons and various kinds of options through which a user is able to interact with our application. So, whenever he presses any button or any other interactive component of our JSP page, he should be interactive with what? It should, because this is within a browser, it would result in generation of a request. So, request normally would involve, when they reach the server side from the client, would involve some kind of a processing to be done. So, you receive a request, do some processing, get some results and display it. Fine. Most common thing, this is the kind of sequence which we follow, and therefore, the things which is used for handling the request would be a servlet. It is more appropriate, because that is where we have a Java code. It is not about rendering, it is about processing now. So, processing and also things, fine, that can be done easily from a Java programmer would be more used to it. But as far as rendering is concerned, who knows more about how to show a particular thing in a browser? It is a web page designer's job. So, that is a job of a JSP, fine, the JSP developer. So, here we got three things here again. So, we got model, view, controller. Model are nothing but your various kinds of data objects, which are simply having some data within them, and these data objects are nothing but simple Java Bean objects which have got get set methods, the various properties. We know about properties, fine, properties because of get and set methods. Of course, there are some properties which may be read only property, because they do not have a set method, they only have a get method. So, those properties can be read only properties, fine, but yes, because it is having a getter method of particular kind, have it as a property, but it is a read only. So, yes, you may have the components can be having at least the getter methods for the properties which we have, or sometimes get and set both methods. Your web application would involve using such Java Bean components. Then it would involve using, it is not only these kind of components you will have other components which have the business logic in them, some kind of processing which has to be done, fine, and then you will have whatever data comes from the client, fine, as part of a request. What you get is normally some parameters, maybe use them, do some processing, after processing get the results, and these results are in the form of Java Bean components. These components, you would normally set them as part of request attributes. You put them as attributes in request, you put them as attributes in your maybe session also, many times in session, or some of the things in request, and then pass it on, give it, and then you just simply forward it to a JSP for rendering purpose. But initially, whenever someone comes, initially all requests, okay, if we are following the MVC pattern, if we develop using the MVC pattern, we develop servlets for handling request. Okay. So, controller, the role of controller is normally taken care by servlet. So, to consider this, to understand the MVC pattern, we will be having an example later on. In the next module, we will be considering, we are going to be developing a simple Java component, simple web application. It is not a full-fledged web application which we want to develop here, fine, but we would like to have some kind of a web application or some template for a web application. In any web application, what we will have? Maybe you will provide for some kind of a login, starts with some kind of a login. You will have, once he is logged in, you will provide so many other things. Once he is logged in, you will also give information about whatever his personal information, his full name and other things. Maybe you would like to render it in all the subsequent pages, and then various things. And once he is finished with all the things, then he might have a logout, right? So, we will have a login. What we will try to do in our sample application is, we will like to have a login, a logout, a simple login and logout, that is it. because that's something which is commonly used across all applications, commonly across applications. And once he's logged in, we'll have some kind of a home page where he lands, and on the home page we can have a logout option. So initially he has a login. Let's try to use all kinds of things which we have learned so far. We have learned about cookies, we have learned about session, right? Okay. So normally, yes, what we'll have how do we use cookies? Where do we use cookies? Okay, or cookies could be used for storing some information on the client's machine. It can, for example, it could be used so that we have some kind of a automatic login, fine. To have that automatic login, right, if someone comes to our server, fine, to our particular website, if it is found that this person already has certain cookies, we can take him directly to the home page. He need not do a login. There is an auto login, fine. For that, cookies may be used, fine. But whenever there is a login, we create a new session. We would like to start tracking him, and maybe if there is a shopping cart application, if he selects something, he wants to add something to the cart, we will have the use of session, right. In the session there might be a list in which whatever the selected list, it can simply be added, right. So we would like to, in our sample application, we are not designing any application here. This sample application only has a very plain thing. It is going to be providing a login page, it is going to be providing a home page, only 2 pages. Okay, there is a home page where he lands when he does a login, and thus on the home page he might find a logout button. So when he does a logout, he is back into the login page. So we are not having a big application, but just to understand the concepts of MVC architecture, we would follow the MVC architecture when we develop this application. So yes, another kind of component which are useful. So what are the things we will have? As far as views are concerned, if you look at the view, there are only 2 kinds of screens we are seeing in this. There is a login page asking for username and password. There will be a checkbox so that whether he would like to remember the password. A login button, reset button, yes, we can have that. So that will be one page, that is a login page. And we can have one home page, or which does a welcome to the user. So some kind of a welcome message where we can show him his full name, a logout button. That is what we will have in the home page. So 2 JSP files. Fine. Let us call them as login JSP and home JSP. Fine. We will be developing those things, and then we will also have, as far as servlets are concerned, they are there for handling all kinds of interactions. Fine. Okay. So all kind of interactions. Okay. What are the interactions we are going to be having? First interaction. The very first interaction, the very first page where he lands. So if he goes for the very home, fine. If he does not specify, maybe. By default, it goes for something like index.html or index.jsp. I think we can, we have a mechanism by which we can specify that what we want as the welcome page. So can we have something like a servlet being used for the welcome? We can do that. In the web.xml, we have an option of saying welcome file. Fine, we have a welcome file list and showing a welcome file. And in the welcome file, you may mention the URL pattern of a servlet. So this would enable us to have a servlet. This would enable us to have a servlet which gets invoked whenever someone lands on our on the root of our application. So if he specifies the root of the application, yes, we can have our servlet getting invoked. Let us call this servlet as the welcome servlet. So we will have a welcome servlet whose role will be to check whether this request which has come, if it has got cookies. If it has got cookies, then let us check the cookies, extract the cookies. Do we have a cookie with the username and the password? If there is a cookie with the login ID and the password, then we would like to use this, authenticate that. Fine. Again, we should authenticate. If he gets authenticated, we can directly forward him to the home JSP. If he is not authenticated, or if there are no such cookies, fine, then he can be shown the login JSP. So this kind of processing can be done by a welcome servlet. So we will have a welcome servlet to do this. Next, what we will be having is, once he is decided to have, once he is seeing login JSP, the user will be submitting. So when the user submits a login JSP, he will be submitting the parameters for login ID, the password, and whether he wants to remember the password or not. So when he submits this, we will have a servlet to handle that also, and let us call that servlet as the login servlet. So, we will have servlet called welcome servlet, fine, that goes as the to handle the home, its job is to check for the cookies. Then we will have a login servlet. The role of the login servlet, what will be its responsibility? The login servlet would just be simply checking if we have, if the login servlet would check would use an authentication, right. Oh, let us have some another class which we will have as a business component. Let us call it as a business component, because one of the business is to do the authentication. So, there is someone who to do the authentication. So, let us have something like an authenticator. We can develop our own authenticator class. We can decide whether to use database or not to use database. We can have it as very simple thing, fine, where but it could then be replaced according to our requirements. You can replace it with something which uses database or fine as per requirement, fine, it can be changed. But we will have separate authenticator who just carries out, who receives the login ID and password and is able to say whether this is a valid login ID or not. And if it is a valid login ID and password combination, then giving all the information about the corresponding user. Oh, this login ID is for so and so user, that user has name, address, email ID and other, all his details. There can be a user info, yes, that is a data object, right, the data for the user, that is a user info. So, we can have another class called the user info. So, user info is going to be a simple Java Bean component. So, that is where we will have a Java Bean component with some properties, okay, fine. So, this is one user info component which will also develop, fine. So, this goes as part of the model, fine. As part of model we have the user info, as part of controller we will have welcome servlet, we will have another one called the login servlet, yes, it allows us someone to log in, and we will have another one, because once he is shown the home page, right, what the login also does here is, what the login will be doing, okay, it will use the authenticator, authenticate. If he is authenticated, he will fetch the user information, full user info. So, he gets a user info object. So, that is a data object, puts the data object into, he now creates a new session. He says, oh, this is a person who is who is doing a login, I would now like to start tracking him. So, he creates a session for this, for the current user, and puts the user info in the session object. This is useful, so that all subsequent pages have this object, all the subsequent pages whenever they are being shown to this particular user who is logged in, we have the user's information object available, maybe. So, we can use it for showing him his full name and all other things, fine, and in the pages he likes to see his full name, there is some welcome message, fine. So, in this we will use here in the next page, which is the home page, we will welcome message with the full name of the user and maybe other information also. We might have a very simple home JSP being created by using the login. So, we have one controller for, but now what does this home page have? This home page also has a logout button. So, when someone clicks the logout button on the home page, it should be going to another controller. So, it is an interaction. So, for handling that logout, yes, we will have a logout servlet, fine. What the logout servlet should simply do? It should simply close the session. And oh, one more thing what we can use here, fine, is whenever the session is closed, how does the session get closed? Oh, because he does click the logout, or maybe the session is expired, whatever the case may be. So, whenever there is a logout, maybe there is some cleanup to be done related to this user, fine. If any such thing is to be done, we can have a listener, which is our HTTP session listener. So, session listener component can also be created here. We will see what all things we can develop in our exercise, but one thing, we are following MVC pattern. We will have controller in the form of servlets, we will have some simple plain Java components, that is going to be our model, and then we will have JSPs. Yes, we are only having 2 JSPs here to be used as the view part, fine. So, MVC pattern is what is commonly used in web applications, fine, and we would understand that by using a simple, by creating a simple web application, fine. The web application is not achieving anything except for doing a login and logout. When someone does a login, we show a home page, and then someone does a logout, we again are back onto the login page. Oh, of course, I think we will need one more component here, one more simple Java Bean component, because there will be, when the authentication fails, we show him a message, error message. or that message. So there has to be a component which carries the message value of the message. So we can have a message info object or message bean or whatever. And so we can have a message bean class. And so another bean component can also be there like this. And so this is how we have MVC. Fine. The simple thing is clear. MVC model is related to the data. Fine. The data components. View is related to the rendering aspect, and controller is related to handling the interaction. In the next module, we will be looking at the at a sample application which follows this MVC. Thank you.